with you so you can see my presentation. Yeah, if I hope everyone can understand me well. I can't see your faces, so I can't really tell. But if there is something wrong, you can type it in the comments. Yeah. Hi. So welcome to this talk on Cripping the Organising. This talk is hosted by DICE Berlin and is part of DICE Rising, an online program consisting of workshops, mentoring, and community building. Thank you so much for putting in the labor to organize this event and to invite me to talk about access, which I think is so important, and especially in Germany, I feel something people and organizations still struggle to commit to. Yeah. My name is Agnieszka. My pronouns are she and her, and I was born in Poland and came to Germany at the age of six. And I support organizations in becoming more accessible. I give workshops and lectures and talks on this subject, and I work myself artistically also around the topics of mental health, trauma, and collective care. Everything I know and will talk about is built on the work of so many other people. Some of them I was lucky to meet, others I was not lucky to meet. I have never met. So much of my knowledge and sensitivity for this topic comes through my own lived experience, through the experience of my dear friends, who experience ableism on an everyday basis, through my work at ARCA in Scotland, or a political arts organization that really thinks about access in a way I have rarely discovered in other organizations. And a huge chunk of it also comes through the disability justice movement, which is the second wave disability rights movement in the US, in the Bay Area, and was developed by queer and trans disabled people of color. Yeah, so many books and blogs and zines that people have made, written relating to access and disability, and that I was lucky enough to discover or to get exposed to. I'm going to talk today about accessibility in organizing, and when I say organizing, I mean a variety of things. This can be small meetings or bigger scale events, and I will refer to all of them as events. Yeah. Also, in talking about access, I will refer a lot to disability, but I think that access can be helpful for everyone, actually, for everyone. Yeah. And yeah, so yeah, and at some points I will also give reference to this. Okay, so the structure of the talk will be, I will talk about access needs first, ask you and talk about access needs first, and then I will give you a little glossary on disability, because just so we know what we're talking about. And then I will talk about access, and I will then give you practical advice on creating accessibility and organizing. And then at the end, there will be Q&A. People can only participate in the chat or in the Q&A if they have registered through Zoom. If you are only watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Periscope, Facebook, then you might be able to leave maybe a comment, but I won't be able to see it. If you're watching on those platforms and at some point you would like to participate, then that's possible. You just have to register on the website in the Zoom, and then you get the link, and then you can participate. Yeah. So you can use the comments option for anything. If you have questions for the Q&A, please post them in the Q&A option, which is in my, next to participants. Yeah. And you can do that throughout the whole talk, so you don't need to keep the questions until the end. I will pick them up later then. Yeah. Cool. So I would like to start this talk with posing again the question about access needs. And I know you have already been asked about your access needs in the registration form, but if you have any other needs, for example, more pauses, or you want me to speak slowly, or you want me to repeat everything or summarize, please let me know. You can write this in the chat, as I said, and I want this to apply to the whole time of the workshop. Yeah, I posed this question in advance also with the knowledge that it carries a certain precariousness in it, because first of all, needs around access are rarely clearly definable and articulable. Access needs are characterized by inconsistency. People with chronic illness or mental illness, for example, can experience a sudden change in their situation from one moment to the other, and thus have rapidly changing access needs. And there is this prevailing notion that disability has more legitimacy if there can be clear needs articulated from it. On the other hand, there is still so much shame or taboo associated with the question about access needs. For example, for people with mental health issues, I find it really difficult to express their needs because this field is still so stigmatized. And then this brings me also to the next point, namely how the question about access needs demands an outing and thus reveals and co-constructs our vulnerability at the same time. There is so much contained in the outing, but two dimensions, which I will also talk about later, are deviation from the norm and dependency on other people. Like those, for example, who want me to speak slower, reveal an otherness to those who did not mind the previous speed of speech and are also dependent on my understanding and goodwill, as well as that of the other participants to respond to their needs. I'm aware of this precariousness or porosity or fragility of this question about access needs. The question is being asked in the context of a world that considers deviation from the norm and dependency on other people, animals, or things to be wrong. But at the same time, however, the question, I feel, already points to something else, perhaps a future or a utopia. In any case, something in which our bodies and minds and souls are, in all their diversity, are considered to be valuable, beautiful, lovable, and desirable. And our dependencies, or rather interdependencies, because we're all interconnected with the world and the people around us, in all their ambivalence, is seen as something that makes us fundamentally what we are. Yeah, and in reference to this other, I hope the question of about the access needs in the best case can perhaps already pave the way to this other. Yeah. I think something similar also happened with the question about pronouns, for example, or gender neutral toilets. And it took so much strength and vulnerability from people, or for us to get to this point where, at least in some contexts, this became a normality or a common. And yeah, like to not assume the pronoun of somebody else, to write them on the text and everything. And I consider both things, like the pronoun thing and the gender neutral toilet, as an access accommodation to an access need. And my wish for our future is then that also the question about other access needs becomes something that we don't even have to think about anymore, because we include it in all that we do. That is why I find the question super important, like especially to get a sensitivity also for it. Access is different for every person, and there is no general model that could work for everyone. Like in this sense, it is not possible to create full access for everyone. this is contrary to the myth of inclusion that's been told to us for such a while now. Yeah, but the change starts in our attitudes and in the small things also. Yeah. I'm like, English is not my first language, and even though I hope I speak English fairly well, it's the first time that I give a talk like this in English. So yeah, be patient with me. And then also talking about disability and access, I feel that so much of the vocabulary is still in motion. And if you recognize I'm saying something that might be said in a better way, then you can definitely give me feedback on that. The only thing I'd love for this, and this is my personal access need, I want people to communicate in a fair way and non-aggressive. Yeah. So now I'm going to go over to the glossary of disability. Yeah, so when I talk about disability today, I refer to a broad and intersectional understanding of disability. Intersectionality means that a person's experience of discrimination can never be broken down to a single issue. Disability, race, class, gender, sex, religion, etc. interact in the experiences of people and give everyone a unique experience of discrimination. I refer to the principles of disability justice, which I named in the beginning. And disability justice moves the understanding of disability away from a single issue approach to an understanding of disability being intersectional and multisystemic. I give you two quotes to underline this a little bit from Carolyn Lazard, who I will also refer to later in the talk. Yeah. Within this framework, disability is defined as an economic, cultural, and/or social exclusion based on physical, psychological, sensory, or cognitive difference. Disability justice movements understand disability unevenly distributed, primarily affecting Black and Indigenous communities, queer and trans communities, and low-income communities. And in the German context, I would also name migrant and people of color communities. Yeah. Oops. Oh. Wait. Disability is often the cause and the consequence of poverty. Yeah. Disability can affect people in many different ways. Even for people who have the same disability, it is oftentimes not the same experience. Disability can affect vision, hearing, thinking, learning, movement, mental health, remembering, communication, and social relations. And many other for sure too. Yeah. So this list is not exhaustive. There are visible and invisible disabilities. That is super important to know, so you don't make any assumptions about people's disabilities in the same way as you wouldn't make any assumptions about people's gender or about people's origin or religion or whatever. Yeah. I will use the term disabled person, disabled people in this talk instead of people or person with disabilities. This is the person first way of saying it. So person with a disability is something that was used to be very common and is still very common in German language, but it's something that is changing, especially in the English language, because the segregation of person and disability and this person first thing kind of is based on the idea that the person is good, but the disability is bad, and that's why you have to segregate it. And this is something that people with disability, that disabled people, don't. It's not great. It's problematic. In Germany, also people started experimenting with the underscore. It's like the underscore Hinderung. It's also to show, how like people are, or disability is constructed by barriers to be disabled. You could do it with disability as well. But the underscore is something that is quite inaccessible for people who are visually impaired and use screen readers. That also refers to the gender gap. Okay. Then there's different models of disability, and they are kind of historically constructed. I don't know how to say it. Yeah. So the medical model, the individual model of disability, is something that was very prevailing until about the 60s in the Western world. And it's something that is, so disability here is defined by medicine and science and is seen as an individual problem where the body is wrong and needs to be fixed. And the disability is defined by impairment. This model is also connected with the idea of integration, to fixing people so they can be integrated back into the work sphere. The social model is a model that came through the disability rights movement that started in the 60s and then went and is going on until today. Here the disability is defined by the systems of power and is a social problem. The world is considered to be wrong and needs to be fixed, and disability is defined by barriers and oppression. Today, and this is also the kind this includes the idea of inclusion, where the word needs to be altered to accommodate accessibility needs of people disabled people. The thing that happens with the inclusion model is that it leads to thinking that actually everything is okay, and there is just a few alterations that need to be done to include people who have access needs. And we know this from other struggles that this doesn't work, and that it actually leads to tokenizing people. Disability is constructed by both. It is constructed by the world that we live in, or the context that we live in that surrounds us, and it is also constructed by a certain kind of body or mind experience. People have different bodies, and that's super cool. And that's how you have to think, how we should think about disability. The word Crip stems from the word cripple and is a positive reclamation of the word. It's actually also still in the process of being reclaimed. It's quite similar to maybe the word queer, and I think that it also comes from like queer, Crip, queer disabled communities. The word cripple has been used in history until today sometimes to discriminate people with disabilities. And in the positive Crip word, people use it to identify as Crips, to express community and solidarity for all disabled people without there being a hierarchy between the different disabilities, and also to express resilience against ableist supremacy, to disempower the discriminative usage of the word cripple, and also it can be used as a verb. To crip something means to dismantle normative systems that enable ableism. And that's how I'm using this in the title of this talk. Yeah. Ableism is the discrimination against and exclusion of disabled people. Ableism is based on can happen on a structural level, or happens on a structural level, is structural. It's based on normativity, like the structural is based on normativity. Normativity is the understanding that there is a normal body or a mind that should look, sound, feel, smell a certain way, and that should be able also to do certain things in a certain time and in a certain space, and all of them are also normative. Like, for example, to work, to sustain themselves, to get out of bed without help, etc. A body that is not considered normal is considered to be wrong. The other thing is independency, autonomy. The idea that everyone should be able to live without help of others. Dependency is also considered to be wrong, while actually we're all dependent on another, and there is nothing that we do, nothing that we eat, nothing that we wear that is not being done by someone else, or, where there was not someone else involved in what we do. Then ableism is based on the exclusion of people with disabilities from economic, social, and cultural sphere. It starts with the school system, all kinds of social and cultural activities and work, and it even goes to communities people with this disabled people usually actually belong to, but are excluded because of their disabilities. Then there are stereotypes. Like, there are many prevailing stereotypes of disabled people, like, for example, the hero who overcame their disability and is now, amazing. Or a disability to be a horrible burden, and everyone who sits in the wheelchair is just like very a sad being. This is stuff that is very, very destructive for disabled people, and also, like all other stereotypes, never ever meets the lived experience of disabled people. The worst form of ableism was euthanasia, which describes the procedure of annihilation of disabled people during National Socialism. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to talk about access. Cool. Yeah. And I'm going to start talking about access with a quote by Mia Mingus, who is a queer, physically disabled woman of color adoptee who is heavily involved in transformative and disability justice. And she describes in this text that is called Access Intimacy, the missing link. And it's really one of the most beautiful texts I have ever read. I can definitely recommend reading this. She describes a certain kind of intimacy that is different to the intimacy that we experience through love or through friendship or kin or mutual interest. And she then calls it access intimacy and describes it as following. Access intimacy is that elusive, hard to describe feeling when someone else gets your access needs, the kind of eerie comfort that your disabled self feels with someone on a purely access level. And then later in the text, she says, access intimacy is something I am coming to understand that I need in my life, something that I cannot and don't want to live without. I need it to literally be my whole self, because access is such an intimate part of my life as a queer, physically disabled woman of color adoptee. I really love this text, and I really love it because it shifts the narrative about access from how people oftentimes usually understand it, like logistics or something that we have to do more of now because it's been required by funders or something like that, something that we can like check in checklists, something that is always thought of as an add-on or as an afterthought after having programmed everything, and then in the end it's like, oh, access. So she shifts this understanding of access being about logistics to something that is intimate, and I think this is very helpful to understand because access is such an intimate part for so many people, not just disabled people. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give you 3 reasons. This is a little bit TED talky, but I still want to give you 3 reasons why you have to think about access, or why actually I think access should become the priority at the moment of organizing. It's 1, ableism is a system of oppression that needs to be challenged, dismantled like other systems of oppression too. I know many or some of you who are listening have been putting so much labor into dismantling white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, classism, etc. In relation to all the efforts that have been put into challenging these systems of power, there have been put significantly less effort into challenging the exclusion of disabled people, called ableism. Yeah, and but just to say, if you speak to queer communities, there are also queer disabled people. Or if you speak to trans communities, there are also disabled trans people. And there are also disabled people of color, disabled poor people, you know, gender non-conforming people who are disabled and who in majority have been excluded from the spaces that are also organized for them, and maybe even particularly organized for them. Ableism is, as I said, a system that discriminates and excludes people disabled people. And if we want to dismantle systems of oppression, then ableist supremacy is one of them. And if you don't work to create access or to dismantle this ableist supremacy, then in a way you also become complicit. Yeah. Access needs to be created for all of us and not just for some of us. That's also a quote by Mia from her bio. Yeah. If you create access for some people, for example, gender neutral toilets or pronouns on name tags, why do you not want to create access for other people from your community? Or how do you legitimize your preference for one group against another? And I'm not saying like the gender neutral stuff and pronouns as if this was a competition about, access. It's not, because having gender neutral toilet is something that is super, super important to cater for the access needs of some people. And I think that, this can also refer to other access or accessibility in general. The third is very simple. Creating accessibility might help you to increase audience or your participants. Yeah, I would really love to shift the understanding from universal access to collective access. So access becomes like a collective responsibility for all of us, because there is no way to create full access for everyone. And we are all involved in creating access. And access has to become the priority until it becomes the normality. I have jumbled up my notes here a little bit. but yeah, well. Okay, so so now I'm gonna come to, or maybe just one last thing. So yeah, about collective access, I was a little bit confused because that was actually supposed to come later. Yeah, like so many people in disability communities or in people of color communities or trans communities have been involved in creating access for one another for such a long time, and have also found so many creative ways to do that out of necessity. And this is kind of like what I'm also talking about, to take this responsibility into all our hands. All of us are responsible to create access. And yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to come to the practical advice on creating accessibility. So first of all, if we want to create accessibility, then we might face some barriers for creating access in the in the group or in the organization. The first thing might be feeling of overburdening, because starting something new for the first time can bring up feeling of overburdening, like you don't know where to start. There is so much to research and think about, so much to do right. And we all know this feeling, but it doesn't go away through postponing to create accessibility. Just try and share work and resources, and also try to not put your expectations too high. Just even to think about it is already a big step. Yeah. Okay. The next thing is privilege. This can be very sticky, as we know from other struggles. Yeah, in terms of like white privilege or hetero privilege. Yeah. But there is no way around this. Like, creating access for some but not for other people is privileging one experience over another, and probably it's privileging your own experience too. That's why we have to deal with it, dismantle it. And then there is shame and defensiveness, which is also very much connected with privilege. And I'm sure that there are many resources in the World Wide Web, for example, how to deal with shame and defensiveness. I just want to say that let's just commit to creating accessibility and try our best in this. It requires work, but you know, no one will ever be perfect. And you can also maybe try to distinguish between the things that you should do in advance and things, for example, that you can't really cater for because you don't know that they will be brought up. That's something that is, you know, very on the basis of access needs, that if you really are open to cater for access needs, then there's always something that you haven't thought of before. And just take all the situations as like, oh, great, that's a new learning experience for me. And next time it will be completely different. But like, to distinguish between the things that you can do before and the things that you can't do, I think also relieves a lot of shame and defensiveness. Then there is also reluctance to change, because you've been doing things in a certain way for a really long time, and you really like this, but access requires change. And if you don't want to miss out on it and like be left behind while the rest of us is trying to create a world that is for everyone, then have fun. Yeah. Then there is also lack of resources and funding. Really important thing, creating access does not rely on having resources or funding. Of course, there is stuff that is expensive, like sign language interpretation, or having a ramp, or also renting an accessible building can be more expensive. But it doesn't rely on it. In fact, it's really mostly about the attitude of people to want to be able to cater for access needs. And I think I come to understand also that the lack of resources and funding is mostly being used as an excuse for not providing access. So yeah, yeah. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the resources you have to create access without having any access to resources or funding. So yeah, these resources are, I think, useful to know. There are so many ways to create access, so many creative ways to create access, and I think that you can learn a lot from communities who have been providing access for their community members already for some time. And if you've already catered for some access needs, then this is also an experience you can take from. But yeah, it's mostly about changing your attitudes and centering the needs of the people you want to address. I think this is really important. So the thinking about time in relation to disability is very, very interesting, and I think also very beautiful. I have always been obsessed with time. I love thinking about time. And in disability studies or Crip theory, there is a concept that is called Crip time. It describes how disabled people experience disability in a different, in a non-normative, like understanding of time in the way, for example, that people who are sick or who have mental health issues, sometimes just kind of like fall into a hole of time, like they are not able to participate, to work, to leave the bed, to be able to speak, to or to communicate in general. And I think that also what is really interesting about the COVID-19 pandemic is that it kind of forces everyone in the world globally to experience this kind of Crip time. I just think that it's really interesting and maybe something we can learn from. Another thing is that people also have different times in terms of, some people might need longer to get to a space, or there are barriers that you can't really foresee. So waiting for a meeting to start can take longer, needs to be accommodated, and or just, simple things like going to the toilet might need much, much longer. So yeah, the experience of time can be very different. But as a resource, I think time in creating accessibility is the most precious and probably the most crucial resource you can have. And this really applies to all kinds of events. It doesn't matter if they are funded or if they are not funded, if they are just meetings or big scale events or institutional events. The earlier you start to think about access, the more accessible the thing you want to organize will be. And at the same time, it is never too late to start thinking about access. Any time is the right time. Now is the right time. Yeah. The second resource you have is communication. This is also so important. The more you communicate about access, the more you share resources, the more you talk to your friends about it, you know, you talk to yourself about it, the more accessible the things that you organize will be. And the more open you are to thinking and communicating about access, the more welcome people will feel to share their access needs also with you and to attend your events. Yeah, that's also really a really important source is the internet. Is a great resource for all kinds of advice on accessibility. We are in 2020, and if you don't know something, then you can research it quite easily. So many people and organizations have put so much work in creating laws and lists and advice, and have written books and articles about disability. And you can also go to libraries if you can and research there, and if they're open again. And there are also people from organizations or just people who are experts in this, you know, who teach, who give advice, workshops. Some of them are free of charge, who do coaching, etc. So, okay, I have, sorry. I missed, I don't know why in this, there is missing the flexibility, which is also really important, which is wanting to create accessibility needs flexibility. It should be on the second, on the third here, because there is no preset configuration that will meet the different access needs of people who come to your events. Like, of course, there's infrastructure, like a door needs to have a certain width for people to pass through with a wheelchair, and ramps need to have certain steepness and stuff like that. But yeah, if you want to really cater for access needs and not just do the bare minimum, then flexibility is something really important. You have to respond to the different needs in real time. Then another thing that is missing here, and that I think that is really important and beautiful, is failure as a resource. Because, yeah, I don't know, we live in a world where everything kind of needs to be perfect and already, you know, yeah, just be perfect. We live in an ableist world, and the world is structured in this way, and also is structured to exclude disabled people. And, you know, we can't really make up for this. This world is inaccessible, but yeah, we can try our best, and in this there will always be failure. And I think to admit this is something really important, and also something that speaks very much to disability. Yeah. Okay. Then the sixth resource you have is your community. As I said in the beginning, also to this part, there's so much knowledge already in your communities about how to provide access, and it's great to involve your communities in the process of working around access. Make sure they have your back and you have theirs in the process, and yeah, just being able to voice issues around creating access is so important. Sharing with your community might be good for your emotional support, for infrastructural support, and might bring up creative ideas to overcome barriers you have never ever even thought of. Then the last thing, of course, is funding, because if you have access to funding, then of course this can be a great resource for creating accessibility. In fact, it should be a resource for creating accessibility. Yeah, because we live in an ableist world and access is expensive. So yeah. Oh, there is, no, there is a Q&A already, but no comment yet. So I would like to give you some first step advice on how to create access in your organization, or how to create accessibility in your organization or group. The first thing you have to do is make access a mandatory area of work for organizing. Access needs to be understood as mandatory in the same way as programming, producing, outreach, communication, tech, etc. And like all the other areas, also access interweaves with the other areas and alters them if it's required. Second is form an access committee or decide on someone who's in charge of access. This is super important. So it's really something that is delegated to people, and you won't, it will not just like be dropped in the way of organizing or programming something, because that might seem more important. It's not, it's all equally important. Yeah. Self-awareness. Look at the ways you usually organize things. Where can you recognize barriers? Be honest with yourself. And if you don't know something, then research. Ask yourself which people are missing in your organization or group, or in your attendances, in your speakers, in your artists. Why do you think those people aren't there? Yeah, this is some questions that I can give you for self-awareness. Then also, of course, include people with lived experience, especially disabled, queer, and or trans folks of color in your process of organizing things. Yeah. Then the areas to consider access in your organizing. The areas to consider access are the organization group itself. Are disabled people involved in organizing our events? Are they hired? Do they get paid? Planning. Access needs to be included into the planning of an event right from the beginning. And if it can't be from the beginning, then as I said earlier, now is the time. Yes. Budgeting. Access needs to be included into the budget if you have access to funds. In different ways, actually, there is some stuff to be said about this more. For example, you should have like if you have a budget, then you should have then you should think about infrastructural access, that like how much does a sign language interpretation cost, or how much does the rent for an accessible building cost, or how much does it cost to get appropriate seating, stuff like that. But then there should also be, like, if you, with the speakers and the artists that you invite, also include always a section about access needs, because you want to cater to their access needs as well. But this is something that will also come in this, like the artists and speakers, and also the attendances or the audience has access needs, and this might also take up some of the budget. Yeah. This doesn't need to be defined. It can just be access needs, and you can write a description why you don't want to define this. This is valuable. Yeah. Then the programming in terms of themes and artists, speakers. Yeah. Like, there has to be diversity in all of this, always, including disabled people's experiences. Communication. This is also a broad topic. Communication will come up in different sections, in different ways. like it was before, a resource. Now this means more the areas of work, and it's more about how do you communicate about access in your organization? How do you communicate about access outside of the organization? How do you communicate about access to other people? Who do you reach out to if you do outreach? Yeah, all the kinds of things that are related to communication. The infrastructure, this is refers to space and time, because both can be different. Like if you want to work with people with certain needs, you might need longer to develop a theme, or, you know, just waiting for a response might take longer time. Then of course, like the space, the entrances, the doors, the walkways, elevators, parking slots, rooms, spaces need to have certain measurements to meet guidelines for wheelchair accessibility, yeah, restrooms, etc. And as I said, already mentioned, the artists and speakers you're inviting probably have certain access needs too. Please ask them and try to accommodate their access needs. A tendency is also, please give people the possibility to raise these access needs with you. Yeah, I will also talk about how a little bit later. I just need to take a sip of my coffee. And tea. Yeah, this is something that is my opinion. I think that the minimum, really the minimum access requirements or accommodations, actually, if you want to organize something, are the following, and these are really just the minimum accommodations. Yeah. So this is this is really the most important thing. It's access information. Nothing is more inaccessible than not providing any information about access. You know, this really excludes people so much from everything. It people always refrain, or some organizations not always refrain from putting the access information because their buildings are not accessible or their events are not accessible, but not giving any information on access is really the most inaccessible thing you can do. Access information needs to be put in a prominent place of your communication, of your website, of your social media, and needs to be synced with all platforms that are being used. If you give access information, try to not make any judgment about how small a door is or how steep something is or something. If you can, then provide concrete measurement. Too many details are better than too little. And yeah, and if you create a program or if you create a description of an event or something, then really try to think about the needs of the people and put them first. Second is access needs. That's why I also put the question about access needs in the beginning of the talk. I think it is really important, and here it is also very much about fostering a welcoming atmosphere or culture in your organization and in your events you organize towards access needs. This welcoming culture refers to yourself, because you might also have access needs. You might also have access needs you don't even know about yet, you know? All the people that you work with might have access needs. They might have children at home. They, they might become sick, they might have an episode, all these things, you know. So all the people who attend your events as well, including the speakers. In advance, people should be able to contact you in various ways about their access needs via phone, email, social media, because people with different impairments use or accessibility requirements use different modes of communication. Also, this should be should get a prominent placing. Maybe can connect this with the access information. And during the event, you should also talk about accessibility in the introduction, for example. Then there in the event there needs to be a person to address about access needs at the event. This person should have general responsibility for making sure access is okay, like, for example, not blocking the walkways, which also appear here, but also to troubleshoot because of access requirements in real time. Attendances, as well as speakers, performers, and staff should know who that person is, and this person should always be easily found. Create awareness for access and handling access. Because it needs this welcoming manner with everyone who you work with. So, you know, people who work with you at an event just know that this is a space that is sensitive to the access needs of other people, and something that can be brought up. Something that is, you know, not like looked weird at if someone doesn't find the person that is responsible and just comes up to someone to some stuff, then the person should be helpful and respectful, you know, and also communicate. This is like, creating awareness also means a lot of awareness for communication. Also, speakers or performers have to be made aware of any access needs regarding to their talk or performance. And then also, you know, just speaking about access, for example, in the introduction of an event, also creates awareness in the people who attend for access in general. Then don't isolate disabled people. Disabled people also have friends and also would like to meet new interesting people in an event. If you arrange seating, think about not isolating people. And this refers also to eating, to meeting and entrance spaces, etc. This refers also to timing. Because as I said, people might have different times, and doing everything on time might exclude also people, you know, who can't make it in the time that you set, because they need to use an elevator or, you know, whatever. Then there's also, you should put up signage, like clear signage, preferably in different languages, about gender neutral toilets, about event rooms, about sensory rooms, if you have some, about childcare, where is the reception desk, etc. This needs to be, signage needs to be very clear and is definitely an important accommodation for access. Then make sure the walkways are not blocked for people with mobility impairment. This is something that is really important. It doesn't matter if with wheelchair or not. Also, people who are visually impaired. Then one thing I list out here is that if you that there should be direct communication with the person you are addressing and not their assistants or their interpreter. If you want to talk to a disabled person, talk to them. This can be difficult sometimes, especially in situations with sign language translation, but really try to stay with the person and make an effort to communicate in an open way. Yeah. Then a really amazing resource is this text that you can find online as a PDF. It's an open source. It's called Accessibility in the Arts, a Promise and a Practice by Carolyn Lazard. Carolyn Lazard is an artist who works around Crip issues, and I really love their art. And yeah, this is in English, so that's why I'm bringing this up, but there are also so many other resources you can find in the internet that are different and in different languages that include checklists, for example. Yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna use this a little bit as a resource for the other, like the help. Yeah, to talk about access a little bit more in detail. This is now, the stuff that comes now is some of it is dependent on funding because you need to pay for it. Then, yeah, then, this is what I wanted to say. That's why I got so confused. I wanted to say that Carolyn Lazard wrote this for art spaces because they are an artist, but or I think that's why, but I don't think that this only refers to art spaces. Definitely not. Like it's a really great resource. And what is also really amazing about it is that it also picks up on disability justice. Yeah, and doesn't see disability as just like bound to logistics or a single issue. So yeah, cool. If you, something general to be said in advance of this, if you want to work with experts like audio descriptors or live captioners or sign language interpreters, you have to plan this way in advance or well in advance of your event, because it's difficult to find people who translate, and you know, it's people are booked out, and it just really needs some time beforehand to be able to book someone for an event. If you list the different access accommodation named in the following, for some there is also symbols, like for example for audio description or sign language, and you can include those symbols. You can find them on the internet, and you can include those symbols in your access info on your website or social media. Yeah, cool. Just checking time. Yeah, we're still in time. So yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what all the different things are, so you just get an overview, but I'm not going to like give you full detail to it. This is something that you have to do yourself to research this, and there is really so much about this in the internet. I think just when you put in like accessibility checklist, it will be 10 pages of Google just with different checklists for different events or general, you know, yeah. So audio description. Audio description is the narration of visual content for visually impaired people, and it's used for film and video or for images if they are brought up in a performance, or, you know, It can happen live with headphones, or not with headphones, and it can also be something that speakers or performers can be made aware of. So if they use imagery or video, they also might be able to describe what's happening if you don't have any funding to get a professional audio descriptor. There's also workshops people can do in becoming audio descriptors. This is something, if you want to create access consistently in your organization, in your events, then this can be also something that is maybe a little less pricier than getting an audio descriptor for other things. So captioning, live captioning, is real-time speech text captioning, because not this is mostly for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, because not all people who are deaf or hard of hearing speak sign language. And this is also a great tool for people who are neurodivergent, which means have different brains, that function in a different way than like what is the norm or the typical. For example, autism as an example for neurodivergence. And also this can be very helpful for non-native speakers. If you can't do live captioning, then there is also ways to hand out your scripts to people so they can read along. There's always ways to create access. So chemical sensitivity. Some people have multiple chemical sensitivity or had chemical injuries and are very sensitive to petroleum-based chemicals. That's why people who are really thinking about access and who have maybe access to a different room, you can there create a room that is chemical-free, fragrance-free. And there's also advice on how to do that in the internet. You can ask people who come to your events to not put any perfume, to have smoking areas, like not in the entrance, for example, stuff like that. Cool. Childcare. Yeah. There are people who need childcare as an access requirement, and you can either have the funding to provide childcare, or you do everything without funding. Then maybe there is also one person that wants to do the childcare at an event. If you are not able to provide childcare, then please put at least a PlayStation so kids can play with something. And in the restrooms, there should be baby changing stations for all genders. Closed captioning is a text-based transcription of text-based dialogue. It's also what we call subtitles. And if you show a film, if you have a screening, show a film or a video, then and there is subtitles available, then you can turn on subtitles when possible, or you can maybe produce subtitles yourself for the stuff that you do, or of course there are professionals who you can pay to produce subtitles. Communication again. This means more allow for variations in speech, speed, pausing, and replies. Like people really might have different modes of speaking, speaking faster or slower than other people, and don't make any judgment about the communication styles of other people. And if you communicate yourself, then try to be open in your communication and find ways to, accommodate the needs of people in your communication. Another thing is also to not use too much jargon, because this is also very exclusive for people with, for example, learning difficulties. Yeah, and then where possible, give summaries in maybe simple language. Consent. Try to foster a culture of consent. People should be asked before they get touched, unless it's a really close friend. It doesn't matter if it's their hair or if it's their shoulder. Performers also need to announce when they want to enter the personal space of people in a performance. Content warnings can be done written or verbally, like providing knowledge about content that might be triggering is really important. Themes to mention as a trigger warning before are rape, sexual assault, suicide, self-harm, incest, child abuse, and gendered and racialized violence. Yeah, and also ableist violence. Yeah. Food and dietary requirements. You should list all, if you provide food in your events, then you should list all allergens, which are tree nuts, gluten, dairy, soy, seafood. And if you can, you should list all the ingredients in like general. Please try to cater for the different dietary requirements and also have alcohol-free drinks. Image caption for web and social media. This is super important for people who use screen readers. This is the software that transforms text to speech or text to braille. All images need alt text. Alt text is something, you can put into this. It's like in all social media now. You can, if you post an image on Instagram, on Facebook, there is always this you can edit the alt text, and you should do that. I think if you create a website, then you have to do this now. I think there is no it won't let you continue with your programming if you don't put alt text, which I think is really great and should be also a thing for Instagram and Facebook. Alt text should contain 1 to 3 sentences that describe an image as simply as possible. And if you put an image of text, for example, if you repost something on Instagram, you should write the text in the image description under the picture also. Another thing also is like what I said earlier, the gender gaps or the star thing that's used to, talk about gender non-conforming people, or, include all genders into, and this is mainly common in German language. It's not really accessible for screen readers. And what is a way to do that is to use the 2 dots, because then it's been read in exactly the same way as it's supposed to be read. While when you put the star, then the screen reader actually reads star. So that's something super annoying. Yeah. Okay, lighting and flash recording. You should warn people for any stroboscopic light, and if you can, dim light for your events, because that's also more accessible than bright light might cause migraines, for example. Yeah, okay. Live streaming of events can increase accessibility. because some people might not be able to leave their beds. So yeah, you can use this. It's a great thing at the moment with Corona to be able to try these things, because then maybe when we're going like back to normal, this can also be a way to increase accessibility. Yeah, or if you want to capture people in your recording, then you should ask people for their consent. Mobility. Yeah, there are certain kinds of guidelines for measurements, like doors need to have a minimum width of 90 centimeters for wheelchairs to be able to pass through. Places for full movement, like turning, should be 150 times 150. If you have stairs, then you can get ramps, and they have to have a certain kind of steepness. All of this I already mentioned. This is exactly this kind of stuff about like the measurements. It's something that there you can find everywhere. And one thing I just want to say is that if a building is inaccessible, then it usually is inaccessible. Like 1 step or 3 steps you can maybe make up for with a ramp. But just, you know, if you need to construct something amazing or whatever, you know, in some cases, then this might be useful, of course. But just try to consider how a person might feel like if they are being made such an exception to the others, you know. Another thing is that I think is also really important is that if you choose accessible building, then try to choose one that is accessible for everyone through the same entrance, because if people need to go through the back door, it's just, you know, a different feeling for people to come in, and it's not the same like you know, being in the entrance with everyone and having a chat with everyone like everyone else. Yeah. Cool. Okay, personal care assistants or service animals. Disabled people sometimes bring personal care assistants or service animals, and none of them should be charged. If you think about seating, there should always be seats available for assistants. Service animals should be let into the events, and of course, like if there are people with animal allergies, like they should be made aware of the animal, and then maybe you can solve the thing with seating arrangement to accommodate both. Restrooms also have to have mobility measurements for wheelchair users, so they need to be wheelchair accessible. They need to be gender neutral, and they need to have baby changing space. Language. Yeah, not everyone speaks the same language, so try to maybe also give summaries in other languages, you know, like German and Turkish. Yeah. So yeah, I also already spoke about this a little bit, but then seating arrangements is like different people need different seating. Like some people might need a seat with a back, some people might need a seat with where they can put their arms, while this might be something limiting for people who are fat, for example. So just if you have seating, just try to have a variety, and also it's best if the seating can be moved, so you can also cater for the access needs that come up in real time. Sensory rooms are really cool for neurodivergent people. It's calm spaces where they, with sensory stimulation or calming, they can have blankets or pillows, yoga mats, balls, dim lighting, just different things, just to chill. Yeah. Sign language interpretation, of course, has to be planned, as I said, well in advance. It is a little bit difficult here in Germany in terms of translation from English, because from English to German Sign Language, because many people who are sign language speakers don't speak speak German Sign Language. Some of them might speak International Sign Language, but there is no like international sign like there is with English language, that, because there's British Sign Language, there's American Sign Language, there is Canadian Sign Language, there's it's not the same. And especially here in Germany, from like speaking English to interpreting German German sign is something that is really difficult to find, and is also a lot of work, because you have to, you have to do double the work in your head to translate. But yeah, it is possible to find people who do that. If you have events in German and need for them to be translated into German Sign Language, then that's definitely something that can be done, but also needs planning time. And usually you need 2 sign language interpreters, because it's really hard work and people need to change. It is expensive. I think that if an event is really great for the community, then maybe there are people who might be able to do it, to support you in doing this. If you have funding, then you should definitely try to provide sign language interpretation, at least for some of your events, if you can't do it for all of your events. Sliding scales, economic justice is also really important, because not everyone has the funds or the money to visit an event if it costs money. Sliding scales is a really amazing way, and maybe there is also you can also just do it on the base of donation. Then text needs to have high contrast, and if you can, use lists and tables, because they are very accessible for screen readers, and use accessible fonts, which are, for example, sans serif. I don't know how you say that in English. In French it's sans serif. Exactly. This is also stuff that you can find easily on the internet. If you have an exhibition or something that is with objects, then you might maybe do a touch tour in advance of the performance, or in the space, in general. Because some things can be maybe touched, and then people just get a much better understanding of how the space is and feels like, and everything. Yeah, this is especially for visually impaired people. Cool. Then the last point of this one is transportation. Transportation is super important for disabled people, not just for disabled people, also, for example, for trans feminine people of color. Transportation is really an issue. How do I get to the event? Where is the next bus station? Is there can I get there safe? Can I get back from there safe? Is there any curb cuts? Is there any obstacles, any parking nearby? Maybe you have, for safety reasons, you can put some budget aside for people who really don't feel safe or who can't, get away otherwise, and you might accommodate the taxi. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So this is the last point. No, it's not. It's the second last point. I'm gonna be quick because now I want to have time for the Q&As. Especially in Germany, like the public funding, the bigger public funding, they require access in if you want to apply for funding for an event, then they want you to put access into the funding, but oftentimes they give you much less money than what you applied for. And I have this idea and I want to work on this, and maybe if people want to share their email addresses or something like that later, if they want to think about this with me together, is to find a way to obliging funding bodies to give full budget to access. This is something that can only be done if you, as an organization or as a group of people or as an organizer, if you already think about access and if you commit to creating access. Yeah, so that's the first step. And then the second is that I don't know, maybe there's a campaign or something like that we could do to oblige, or a text that could be written or something like that, that can always be sent to the funding bodies to always give full budget to access, because that is something that cannot be cannot be cut. Also, I think that I'm thinking about writing something like a handbook for how to budget access properly in your organization, in organizing events, and using this handbook maybe for this. So it's something, yeah, similar. Cool. My last tips for you if you want to create access is, first of all, don't tokenize. Of course, we know that from other areas. So many times I have seen organizations inviting a disabled artist or speaker without working on creating access for the audience, for example, or access in general. Sometimes I have seen a series of talks, and let's say one talk was about disability, and then a disability in the arts or something like that. And then that was the only talk of the whole series with sign language interpretation. Just consider that disabled people have various interests like you, and not just interests that are disability related. Yeah. Cool. Don't assume, I said this earlier, don't make any assumptions about people's gender identity, origin, or disability, or religion, or, whatever, about their access needs or how to meet them. Also, trust that people know best who they are, who they want to be, what they can do, and what they need. Don't pity or patronize. People with disability have been very much exploited by a charitable system, where the donors are the ones in power, and where disability ought to be seen as something pitiful. This is very patronizing. We have to break this. Don't do this. Don't be defensive. I had it earlier as well. If you get feedback from people, don't be defensive. Say thank you and try to apply the feedback to your accessibility accommodations. Something I had to learn too. Don't rely on people with lived experience to teach you about access. This is something that happens all the time for people with disabilities. Things like, oh, you're the first person we've ever had to do this for example, makes people feel all the time like they are a burden or an exception. And this is not cool. And it furthers the exclusion of disabled folks. So don't do that. Don't make people with access needs feel responsible for not providing access. Something I hear all the time, especially from deaf folks, is that they are being asked to split their fee with the sign language interpreter. This is an absolute no-go. Yeah. Okay, last thing, don't make people with access needs pay. Oops. No, this. Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, kind of fit. I missed one. I just, in terms, yeah, don't be too strict with yourselves, but be strict enough. Means do your homework. And yeah, just do it. So that's it. That was the talk, and now I can see people have already posted 3 questions in the Q&A. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for listening so much. Actually, we are only 7 participants, and I almost... Oh, there is something in the chat. Ah, cool. Yeah, that was just a private. Yeah, but you can see it. Sorry. Okay, so I'm reading out the question. I am about to start working in an accessibility working group within a rather mainstream cultural institution where most questions of accessibility fall under rather performative rather than impactful inclusion and diversity protocols. Nonetheless, they are progressive for the cultural context in which they are operating. Do you have any advice on how to approach access in such settings where, for example, heteronormative and neoliberal formulations are usually prioritized? Don't worry about answering this in too specific. Well, I mean, there is, so yeah, you asked this question quite early. I might have maybe answered some of it already, I think also, but yeah, I think a super important thing for creating access in an institution is that the institution that it's, cool. Yeah. Yeah, so that the how do you say, the bosses that you have in an institution, I'm missing this English word anyway, but so that it's shared, that access is being shared from, like, in all like that people understand that this is really important, and that people have your back, like that you don't have to excuse or legitimize or something like that. So this is really important to bring everyone on board. And this can, in an institution especially, this can be done by asking experts to give workshops, to give, to guide you in the process of creating access as well. Just get training for this stuff, because yeah, if you are in an institution and there is funding for this accessible, then why not first of all share it with people who already have a lot of experience in it, and then second, you can also bringing an expert in is something that relieves, like, you from carrying the whole burden of creating access. Because there is also some dynamical stuff that happens. Yeah, cool. Is that something that also, yeah. Okay. The second question is, can you please give us some good example of organizations in Berlin, Germany that are working towards queer accessibility or events, festivals that you think are good models? Oof. Okay. Yeah. So I think there are some organizations, like I don't, well, it's there, like there is, for example, Sophienseele as a space. Sophienseele definitely caters a lot for accessibility needs, like they have touch tours and stuff like that, and there are people with disability, like disabled people involved in organizing the stuff that they do, and they definitely program a lot of disability related stuff, deaf related stuff, and yeah, so they are really great. Of course, they also have a lot of queer issues. Then I think in Germany it is actually still really difficult. There are not really, yeah, thinking about it more. There are support groups, like for example, GLAD e.V., which is for queer people of color, and they definitely do a lot about access. Yeah. Then events or festivals, I think is still really hard. Yeah, definitely really hard. There is 2 organizations that help to increase accessibility here in Berlin. One is called Berlin Inclusion. This is something they work with within the arts, and then there is diversity, arts and culture, and they can give advice on things, and also know if you're looking for something, yeah, where to go to, and they also organize events that are accessible. I'm thinking, I remember also Missy magazine at their birthday. They also had sign language interpretation at their event. Yeah. Cool. I hope that was in any way helpful. Okay, cool. Can you tell us about your personal experiences, the successes and challenges in organizing accessible events and spaces? Yeah, so I think, as I said throughout my talk, that like the most important, like that there is 3 really important things for me. Is one, to think about time when you want to create access, and the second is your communication, how open it is. Like you have to definitely change your style of communication, and then the other thing is provide access information. That's like the 3 really important things. And I think if you do these 3 things, then this is already, like success is also such a, because I was talking earlier about failure instead of success, and now there's a question about success. But I think trying to work around these 3, or like taking these 3, and then also try to meet minimum requirements and stuff, and just be creative. I think the most beautiful things happen when you get creative. And whatever, I was thinking to organize a salon with friends to talk about, like to have food and to talk about certain issues. And then I have many deaf friends, and we were thinking about how to organize it, because we didn't have any money for a sign language interpreter. And then also there were different sign languages spoken, so we would have had several sign language interpreters, and for American Sign Language here in Germany, I know only of 2 sign language interpreters who know American Sign Language. So yeah, what we came up with was just that no one would speak at the whole event, and that all of us would write. And of course, this is not perfect, but it is much more accessible than talking. And yeah, I think that there is so many ways, and also I can definitely uh, tell you to read stuff that Mia Mingus has written. Like, her blog is so amazing. And then there is this really amazing book also. It's called Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice by Leah Lakshmi Peepsna Samarisinia. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. And this book is so beautiful, and also like tells stories in a very like beautifully written way about how people were just doing access because there was no way around it. If they wanted to be part of big meeting that was not accessible, then they were like working towards that together in the disability community. Yeah. Cool. I think that's it. Yeah. So if there are not more questions, then cool. Thank you so much for joining this talk, for participating in this talk. And yeah, if you have any more questions or something like that, then you can, yeah, I can, I don't know, maybe, actually here. You can write me. So thank you. And bye.